Camera? More phonedi koriba? More phonedi, ঠিক আছে মই তো চাই থাকো না মাঝে মাঝে ইয়াতে থাকিব হে চেয়াৰখন ইয়াত দিবা হা ফোনটো মই ইয়াত থৈ দিম ফোনটো মই ইয়াত থৈ দিম হেতু লৈ পিনি কৰিবা হ'ব মোৰটো ওপেনে থাকিব কেমেৰাটো ওলাই থাকিব মানে ইয়াতে ফোনটো মই ইয়াত থৈ দিম হেতু লৈ পিনি কৰিবা হ'ব মোৰটো ওপেনে থাকিব Hello, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the third class of Ethics and Human Interface, Unit 1 and Part 3. So, today we will be covering from determinants of ethics. Yesterday we left right here. Today we'll discuss about the determinants of ethics and those who are joining live, I want you to comment something and make this class as interactive as possible. And those who will be watching this recorded, I want to know your thoughts as well. All right, so let's start from determinants of ethics. All right. So what are determinants? What do we understand by determinants? Means it's a fancy word of saying sources from which ethical standards arise. Determinants simply mean sources. It's a fancy word that we use for sources from which ethical standards arise. Following are the factors or determinants which determinants means things which determine ethics, things which determine human actions are good or bad, ethical or unethical, just or unjust. Okay, so number one, source. Remember in our first class we had already discussed about sources of ethics. So determinants are almost the same. It's the source or factors that determines ethics. So religion is the oldest, the number one, and you can say it's the most effective, one of the most effective determinants of ethics, one of the strongest, I should say, strongest determinants of ethics. It is historically the oldest. Okay, this is one of the keywords that you need to remember, and the most powerful. Why? Because it enters people's subconscious easily. People are more subjected, people are more likely to obey religious texts and scriptures. Okay, so it provides a divinely sanctioned framework of codes, scriptures and commandments. The commandments, the scriptures are accepted as something divinely sanctioned, something coming directly from God, and therefore people obey it most of the time. Okay, example, the concept of dharma. In Hinduism we have the concept of dharma. In Christianity we have 10 commandments that tells us how to act, how to love our neighbors, how to behave with other people. In Islam we have Sharia. Okay, it leverages divine commandment and cosmic accountability. The accountability is not of a worldly level, it's of a cosmic level, even going to afterlife. Okay, for example, the law of karma. What you do, you reap the results of what you sow, right? Or judgment in afterlife. It goes beyond your life to enforce moral behavior. The limit, it can become rigid. There's a limitation, there's a negative side to it. What is it? it helps enforce moral behavior, but at the same time it can be rigid. It can struggle to adapt to modern realities like AI, like bioethics. It is not included in our religious scriptures what to do about ethical dilemmas when it comes to AI, when it comes to bioethics, and also it can lead to intergroup conflict if dogmatically applied. Intergroup, interreligious, international conflict. Next we have culture. Next we have culture. Pay attention here. Culture. What is culture? It represents some shared customs or traditions or language and heritage of a specific group of people residing in a specific geographic region. Okay? For instance, Indian cultural ethos deeply values Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. That means the whole world is one family. So we believe in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that the whole world is one family, and we have respect for elders. These things are a part of Indian culture. It acts as an informal social filter. It tells us what is appropriate and what is inappropriate, what kinds of behavior is acceptable and what behaviors are unacceptable. Okay? It acts as something informal social filter, dictating what is acceptable in daily life. But culture has its limitation as well. Culture is fluid and varies by region. Culture is not uniform across the whole world. It varies from region to region. What is highly ethical in a collectivist culture like India? In India, we have a collectivist culture. What is highly ethical? For example, sacrificing individual desires for family harmony is considered to be something virtuous, is considered to be something ethical in a collectivist culture like Indian culture, whereas it might be seen as a violation of individual autonomy in Western individualistic cultures. Okay? The same act, but in one culture it is considered ethical and highly virtuous, whereas the same thing is considered as a violation of individual autonomy in a different culture. Are you able to follow? Then we have society. Society is the immediate social ecosystem. It includes peers, community. It includes peers, community, groups, socio-economic realities that surrounds an individual. Okay. So, we understand what society is, right? It enforces ethical standards. How? Through social sanctions. There are social sanctions. When you do something that is not socially acceptable, not acceptable to the society you belong to, you could be ostracized from the society. You could be excluded. Okay? There's peer pressure and collective approval. For example, there's certain social stigma against public littering or public corruption. Okay, then there's also a limitation. There's also a negative side. As I've already said, as bureaucrats, you cannot be all positive. You cannot look at everything through rose-colored glasses. You have to be quite, your discernment has to be quite strong. You have to think pragmatically, and your administrative lens, your administrative personality has to be built by looking at things through both positive and negative sides. Right? So what could be the negative side of society? It can sometimes normalize deep-seated systemic evils. It can normalize deep-seated systemic evils like Normalization of untouchability. Can you imagine, at some point of time in history, untouchability was normal. Sati Pratha was normal. Okay? Gender discrimination was normal, and it is still normal in various parts of India or various households even. Okay? Therefore, societal ethics must be constantly audited. It should be audited constantly by universal human rights. Universal human rights must always and always trump over certain societal evils that we have considered to be normal, and therefore we must keep auditing what we think to be normal, what we consider to be normal. Okay. Next is laws. What are laws? These are some codified formal rules. Like in culture, we have informal rules, but in law, we have codified formal rules enacted by the state and backed by the threat of legal punishment and police power in case you violate those laws. Law sets the minimum moral floor of a society. It sets the minimum moral floor, minimum, beyond which you cannot go, below which you cannot fall, okay, of a society, while ethics asks what you should do. Ethics asks what you should do. Law dictates what you must do. Ethics tells you doing what is right, what you should be doing, what you should strive for. But law will dictate what you must do. There is no exception. There's no exception. Okay. For example, Prevention of Corruption Act outlaws bribery. You cannot participate in bribery. Okay. Then, law and ethics are not identical. An action can be completely legal. You remember, there was a previous year question asked from this very concept. What is the difference between something that is legal and ethical, unethical and legal? Okay, so law and ethics are not identical. An action can be completely legal. In today's class, we will be solving a few PYQs. So stay till the end and put your full attention and concentrate properly in your class, and take your notebooks and note down the important points, the keywords and the observations and the things that we are discussing, the examples that we are discussing. Okay, to stay till the end. PYQs are extremely important. You cannot skip on your PYQs, and on this very topic we have a PYQ that we have solved properly. You need to see that. An action can be completely legal but highly unethical. For example, a politician using tax havens exposed by Panama Papers, that is legal. We have already discussed that. They are using loopholes to evade tax. That is legal, but it is highly unethical. Okay, or illegal but highly moral. Certain actions could be illegal, but it could be highly moral. For example, harboring refugees in a totalitarian regime. In a totalitarian regime, if you harbor refugees, yes, it is illegal. Your state declares it as illegal. Your state does not allow it, but it is highly moral. Highly moral. You're giving shelter to a family, shelter to people who are in danger of their lives, whose lives are in danger. Okay. Then we have family and teachers. Family and teachers. This is the primary and very earliest engine of moral socialization. Family acts as the first cradle of value education. We learn sharing, we learn empathy, we learn honesty, and all of these values. The learning, the education begins in our families, at our homes. Okay, while teachers provide the secondary socialization. Family is first, school is second, introducing discipline. We learn discipline in school, merit, civic duty, peer equality, etc. in school. They shape an individual's emotional intelligence and foundational value system during their most formative childhood years. What do we learn? Emotional intelligence, EI or EQ, sorry, foundational value system. What is its limitation? If the child's family, the family that the child comes from, if that family or their educators harbor deep prejudices, the child is highly likely to internalize those biases as their own ethical baseline. If a family is rigid, if a family believes in caste division, in class division, in religious division, then it is very, very likely that the children will inherit those beliefs, will internalize those biases, and they won't even know. They will think it is their own beliefs. They will consider it their own ethical baseline. And growing up as an adult, they will be operating out of that ethical baseline that they have learned early on from their families. Then we have conscience. Then we have conscience. What is conscience? It is internal. We all have our own conscience, don't we? It is an internal voice, an intuitive voice of an individual, their own personal moral compass. Conscience is your intuitive voice. It is your moral compass that passes judgment on your own past or intended actions. That is your conscience. It is the ultimate internal check. If there has to be an internal check, your conscience is your ultimate internal check. When no one else is watching, when no one else is watching, when there's no law, no codes of conduct related to the thing that you're planning to do or something that you have done in your past, your own intuition will pass a judgment, okay? That is your ultimate internal check, which is your conscience. For a civil servant, the laws are when sometimes laws can be ambiguous, not very clear, vague, okay, or silent. The voice of conscience becomes the final guide to preventing an abuse of power. That is your ultimate guide, final guide. Conscience can be, but the limitation again the limitation. What is the negative? What is the limitation of depending on conscience as your determinant of ethics? If conscience determines ethics, what could go wrong possibly? Let's see. Conscience can be highly subjective. It depends on person to person. Some people even seem to be lacking conscience. Okay, it is highly subjective and emotionally driven, sometimes leading to impulsive decisions that lack institutional logic or legal grounding. It could lead you to make certain impulsive decisions out of what? Emotions. And those decisions might lack institutional or logical or legal backing or legal grounding. Is that clear? Now we come to role models. Role models. Are you able to understand or not? Who all are in the class? Just let me see your wonderful, beautiful names or your beautiful creative usernames. Yeah? Is it clear? Is there any confusion? Role models are exemplary individuals that we look up to. It could be historical figures, public icons, or local leaders whose life choices and integrity inspire others to emulate them. For example, Gandhiji, APJ Abdul Kalam, then we have Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, etc., etc., and the list goes on. They move ethics from abstract. Till now we have been learning definitions of integrity, definitions of accountability, transparency, right? But they move ethics from abstract textbook definitions to living. They live what they preach. They live their values. Yeah, living tangible proof. Mahatma Gandhi had once said, "My life is my message, not just a message that you speak." His whole life speaks for the things that he believes in, the values that he believes in. My life is my message. Okay, they demonstrate that upholding absolute integrity is possible even under extreme adversity. They all have gone through extreme adversity, and even under extreme circumstances, they have proved that upholding absolute integrity is still possible. Okay, then we have, what is the limit? What is the limitation? Placing blind faith in a role model can lead to severe moral disillusionment. Sometimes, not always. If that individual later on falls from grace, especially when a person is still living, not talking about historical figures, but when especially the danger is still there, the risks are there when the person is still living, and later on you never know how a person's life takes turn. And if that individual later falls from grace or exposes a personal flaw, then it could be problematic to blindly believe in a person or a person's ideals and to follow whatever he or she says or stands for. Next is judiciary. Judiciary. The courts act as official arbiters of justice and interpreting laws and delivering verdicts that redefine societal boundaries. The courts have to interpret laws and deliver verdicts that from time to time redefine societal boundaries. For example, when homosexuality was decriminalized, the entire nation's, societal boundary or ethical boundaries were redefined overnight. Okay, so that is the role of judiciary. You cannot be stuck in a 16th century mindset, right? The judiciary acts as a progressive, look at the words, pay attention here, progressive moral corrective. It has to be progressive. It has to change and adapt with changing times. It has to update itself. Our societal boundaries, our ways of thinking has to update according to the times we are living in. Redefine, pay attention to these words. Moral corrective, regularly pushing society's ethical baseline forward when the legislature or public opinion lags behind. Yeah? When the legislature or public opinion lags behind, then the judiciary has to step in and to regularly push the society's ethical boundaries. Supreme Court of India decriminalizing homosexuality. Yeah. Then the court declaring Ganga as a legal person elevated the stakes of environmental ethics. These are the examples. Then you can add many more examples. Then we have constitution. Constitution. It is the supreme law of the land. We all know that it serves as the foundational contract between the state and its citizens. It is the supreme law of the land, and it acts as foundational contract between the state and its citizens. It embodies constitutional morality. That constitutional morality is your ultimate anchor. I cannot emphasize upon this enough. It is your ultimate anchor. In India, the preamble, fundamental rights, DPSP enshrine absolute ethical ideals like justice, liberty, equality, fraternity. Now, this is a very important part. Pay attention here. Pay special attention here. For a civil servant, constitutional morality serves as the ultimate benchmark, my dear. Even if you forget everything, do remember this paragraph. Okay? For a civil servant, constitutional morality serves as the ultimate benchmark. It supersedes your personal religion, your personal beliefs and faiths. It supersedes your religion, your local culture, your societal pressure, ensuring equal justice for every citizen, regardless of their background. No matter what your family says, your family might be pressurizing you for nepotism. Your society might be pressurizing you for some kind of a societal evil. Yeah? Your personal religion might be demanding something else from you, but you have to finally find your solution, find your anchor in constitutional morality. It is beautiful. Watch the previous 2 sessions of yours. It is helpful for us. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rekha. Love to hear that. And it's wonderful to have such a sincere student in class. And I hope it will be greatly beneficial for you. So stay around. Now, next is challenges to ethics. What poses a challenge to ethics or our ethical beliefs? What challenges do we face when we are practicing ethical behaviors, or what poses challenges to our ethical beliefs? It is a philosophical argument that threatens something that threatens to break our shared system of right and wrong, something that is a threat to our shared system of right and wrong. Each of these theories attempts to prove that traditional universal morality is either an illusion, impossible to achieve, or completely subjective. There are certain theories that we will study now that poses a threat to our beliefs, our ethical systems, and it tries to say that traditional universal morality is either an illusion or completely impossible to achieve or completely subjective. Now, the first theory that challenges ethics is moral subjectivism. Something called moral subjectivism. Pay attention to the words. Moral is moral. You understand what moral is. Subjectivism is subjectivism as we normally understand it. This is pretty easy. We'll go through it once. You don't have to remember long texts, but ultimately certain keywords, if you remember those, it will help you in your examination. Okay? The belief that moral statements are nothing more than a person's individual feelings or tastes. Moral subjectivism states that moral statements are nothing more than a person's individual feelings or taste or opinion. For example, somebody saying murder is wrong is philosophically identical to saying I don't like broccoli. I don't like broccoli. They are saying that it is philosophically and morally identical to saying that. It just reduces morality to a personal preference. When somebody is saying murder is wrong, they are interpreting it as they dislike murder. I don't like somebody committing murder. This is simply a personal opinion or personal preference, this theory says. Why is it a challenge to ethics? It is. It's obvious, but why? We have to put it in a very clear and, technical language, using ethical technical language. It destroys accountability. It destroys accountability. When you say that it is just a preference, there's nothing called that. The word accountability will cease to exist. If morality is completely subjective, a criminal could argue, if you feel that stealing is wrong, but I feel it is right. You feel murder is wrong, but I feel it is right. So everyone will have an escape. Your opinion is no better than mine, they'll say. It makes it impossible to condemn any horrific act because there is no external yardstick for right and wrong. It will demolish every external yardstick of right and wrong, and it will be impossible to condemn any wrongful act. Next is moral relativism, a little bit similar to subjectivism, but it depends on society to society because we are talking about relativism, comparative analysis between different societies, okay? The belief that right and wrong are decided solely by one's culture, society, or historical era. There is no universal moral truths. According to this theory, there is no universal moral truths. This part is similar to moral subjectivism, no universal moral truths. But what is good in society A might be evil in society B. Here we are talking about two different societies. We are having a comparative analysis. Why is it a challenge to ethics? It paralyzes our ability to fight for human rights. And even here, there will be no sense of accountability. We will not be able to fight for human rights. If moral relativism is true, a nation cannot ethically criticize another country for practicing slavery. Yeah? Pay attention here. If moral relativism has to be true, then a country will not be able to criticize another country for practicing slavery, child labor, or gender oppression, or any kind of crime. Because those practices, they will defend that it is right for our culture, they will say. Okay? It locks society into status quo and traditions and halts moral progress. There will be no moral progress. Understood? Hope it's clear. Not just the meaning, but the difference between moral subjectivism and moral relativism. Now, then we have moral objectivism. This is the counter challenge, moral objectivism. Okay? This is the counter challenge. The opposite of relativism is objectivism, or the opposite of subjectivism is objectivism. It claims that universal moral laws exist independently of what humans think or feel. For example, cruelty to children is wrong. It is objective truth everywhere. Murder is wrong. It is an objective truth everywhere. Does not matter what kind of society or which nation you belong to. Even if a corrupt society decides to legalize it, still murder is wrong. Exploiting children is wrong. Cruelty to children is still wrong. Do we have a challenge here? Yes. The challenge is less dangerous. I should say the challenge is not that big of a challenge as we have seen in moral relativism or subjectivism, but still there lies a minor challenge here even. While objectivism tries to save morality, yes, it becomes a challenge when it turns into moral dogmatism. It has the potential. It could turn, not always, but it has the potential of being turned into moral dogmatism or intolerance even. If you have absolute zero tolerance about somebody else's beliefs or cultures, it can turn into moral dogmatism. Pay attention, questions could be asked from here. This is a very nuanced kind of a thing. You have to pay attention to really get the hang of it, to understand it, okay? Now, if a group believes they possess the absolute, unchangeable objective truth, they often feel morally justified in violently imposing. Imagine if a group believes that what we believe, our beliefs are the absolute moral truths. There's no truth beyond what we understand or beyond our beliefs. Then they will feel morally justified. They will feel it is only the right thing to do to violently impose their own worldview to other cultures, crushing pluralism and diversity. It will go against pluralism and diversity. Yeah? Then we have situation ethics. What is situation ethics now? The belief that there are no absolute rules whatsoever. Okay, situation ethics says that there are no absolute rules whatsoever, but the morality of an action is entirely flexible and entirely depends on the specific context or the situation, driven only by the rule of love or compassion. In a given situation, in a given context, if somebody is acting out of love and compassion, then that act will be considered moral. Why is it a challenge now? Because it creates a slippery slope of self-deception. It could lead to self-deception. It could be wrongfully used. It could be misused. When you throw away clear boundaries, like never accept bribes, this is a clear, rigid boundary, and when you decide to throw that away, it becomes incredibly easy for individuals to justify unethical behavior by convincing themselves that their unique situation warrants an exception. Because of my unique financial situation, it is okay for me to take bribes. One could defend themselves. If I'm correct, moral subjectivism is individuals' preferences. Moral subjectivism is simply believing that there are no absolute truths. There are no absolute truths, and everything depends on one's own personal interpretation. Yes, individual preferences, you wrote. Yes, and moral relativism is that there are no absolute truths. Everything depends on the culture, the cultural context, the context of it. Relativism, it could differ from culture to culture. A group of people, as you have said, yes, collective values, a group of people and two different contexts and two different societies and two different cultures come into play. That is moral relativism. Yes, objectivism is universal moral principles. Yes, very good. You're right. Yeah, you've mostly understood it. Yes. Okay. So it leaves morality without a stable foundation, and everyone can find a loophole to justify their own immoral acts. Then we have psychological egoism. Let's understand what this term means. Sometimes you'll have questions like write short notes on psychological egoism, write short notes on moral subjectivism. Therefore, it is important for you to understand these terms very clearly. A descriptive psychological theory claiming that human beings are hardwired to always act out of self-interest. Pay attention, my dear. Self-interest is the key word here. Self-interest. So everybody, this theory says that everybody acts out of self-interest. Even though they are doing something good, even though they're helping others, this theory says that they are actually acting out of their own self-interest. Okay? Even when we perform apparently selfless acts like donating to charity or rescuing a drowning child, we only do it to feel good about ourselves, gain social praise or appraisal, to be praised by people, to be recognized by people, to be appreciated by people, or to avoid guilt. Ultimately, this theory, psychological egoism, says that even though an act apparently looks like you are helping others, it is for the good of others, but underneath there is one personal motive behind that act, which is to feel good about yourselves, or to get yourself recognized, or to receive praise. Okay? The challenge here is it makes genuine morality impossible. Then you rule out the possibility of genuine morality, right? Ethics relies on the principle that humans have the capacity for altruism. The whole foundation of ethics or ethical principles is built on the principle that human beings have the capacity or have the heart to capacity for altruism. Human beings are naturally altruistic. That is the basic foundation of ethics. The consideration that human beings are naturally altruistic, acting for the pure welfare of others. If psychological egoism is true, then true selflessness is a biological myth, and expecting an administrator to act with self-sacrificing integrity is asking for the impossible. And we know it is not true, right? Then we cannot expect any administrator to act purely out of self-sacrificial motive. Then we have ethical egoism. Ethical egoism. It is a normative theory claiming that human beings ought to act exclusively in their own self-interest. It argues that your highest moral duty is to look out for yourself, and sacrificing your own well-being for others is actually foolish and counterproductive. Pay attention here. So, what should you do? Now, earlier we had studied psychological egoism. That is not a pure normative theory, but ethical egoism is a normative theory. Why? Normative theory means it declares the norms. It says what is right and what is wrong, what you ought to do and what you ought not to do. And here, ethical egoism is saying that you ought to. This one word makes this theory different from the earlier theory of psychological egoism. Now, it says that human beings you should act exclusively in your own self-interest, it's saying. And it is your highest moral duty. What is your highest moral duty? To look out for yourself and sacrificing your well-being for others is absolute foolishness, this theory says. Accent is so good. Thank you, Rajeshri. Good to have you in the class. I hope you all are understanding. I hope I'm able to make things easy and understandable and clear and, easy for you overall. Now, this theory says that sacrificing your own well-being is actually foolish. So why is it a challenge to ethics? It completely flips the purpose of ethics. All this while we have been talking about helping others, alleviating others, thinking about others, being good to others, not doing harm, not causing any kind of harm knowingly or unknowingly to others. But here, this theory completely flips the purpose of ethics and it makes everything look self-centered. Okay? Traditional ethics aims to restrain human greed to build a harmonious society. Traditional ethics is restraining or restraining human greed, asking people to refrain from activities that cause harm to others or exploits a society. But here ethical egoism elevates selfishness into a virtue. Ethical egoism is calling selfishness or self-centeredness a virtue, directly justifying nepotism. If this has to be true, then nepotism is justified, corporate greed will be justified, bribery will be justified, abandonment of the weak, if it benefits the individual, will be justified, if you have to go by this theory. The next challenge to ethics is the doctrine of determinism. Doctrine of determinism. The scientific and philosophical belief that every human action, thought, choice is completely determined by a chain of prior causes. What I am doing today is not completely out of free will, but it is determined by not just action, okay? Thought, action, choice, everything is determined by a chain of prior causes, such as our genetic makeup, our brain chemistry, our childhood conditioning and environment that we grew up in, the family that we were born to, the college that we went to, everything, my thoughts, my actions, and everything that I choose to do today is predetermined by all the events that has been happening in my life up till this point, from my childhood till now. Okay, essentially free will is an illusion. Like, we have free will but not complete or absolute free will. Okay, to some degree this is a bit true. Without free will, but there's a challenge. If we start believing this, let's see what happens. Without free will, moral responsibility evaporates. You can justify any unethical act and blame it on your life, blame it on certain circumstances in your life. You cannot ethically blame a murderer for killing someone if their genetics and their environment and their situation left them with absolute no choice in the matter. Just as you cannot praise a hero who had no choice but to be good. You cannot praise a hero for doing good, because again then you will say that it depends on everything, on a chain of prior causes. Even if somebody commits murder, it can be justified, it can be, the chain of prior causes can be blamed. Okay? If determinism is true, then entire justice system and moral praise and blame become entirely meaningless. No more meaning, no more sense of having any kind of justice system if this has to be true. Now, pay attention to this part, because these challenges are the ultimate tests, because you will face different situations like this. If you succumb to determinism, you cannot succumb to determinism. You cannot succumb. That is not the way. If you succumb to determinism, you will blame the system for your failures. You did something wrong, you failed at something, and you blame the system, you blame your family, you blame the society. If you fall into subjectivism or relativism, you will lose your moral anchor, no moral anchor at all, and let local corruption slide. You will have to let corruption slide. Then a true public servant must acknowledge these challenges, but rise above them, holding on to conviction that free will is real. Free will is real. Whenever you are acting, you cannot believe in determinism. It has an impact on your actions. It could have an impact on the way of thinking, but still you have free will at this point of time. At this point of time, at this present moment, at the present moment, everyone has got free will. Universal human rights are non-negotiable, and public duty must always triumph over ethical egoism. You have to believe that human rights are non-negotiable no matter what, and public duty must always triumph over ethical egoism. Public duty is important, not ethical egoism, not thinking about yourself. So that part is done. We have completed determinants of ethics. We have completed challenges of ethics. We have completed challenges of ethics. Okay. Then we have ethics in private relationships, ethics in public relationships. This part is important as well. And we have previous year questions based on this part. Is determinism equivalent to anti-system? Determinism is not directly equal to anti-system or anti-government, but if we start to believe in determinism, the whole system, government, judiciary, everything will collapse. Okay? It will be meaningless. Okay, it refers to ethical values. Ethics in private relationships means what? It refers to ethical values. It refers to ethical values that a person follows in his or her personal life. In our personal lives, we follow certain values as well, and those are called, those are the ethical values. While dealing with various relations such as family relations, friendships, etc., there is no formal moral or ethical standards. There's no code of conduct on how to deal with our family or friends, how to deal with in our relationships, how to behave. We have no formal code, but for private relationships, rather, they are informal in nature and vary from person to person. They are informal in nature. How we behave, what kind of standards do we follow in our personal relationships, that varies from person to person, and they are informal in nature. Following are some important values in a private relationship. What are some important values? These are pretty easy. We are not going to talk about it in detail. We are just going through the values itself. Care, okay, displaying kindness, concern, feeling loved, building strong relationships. Then we have trust. It is the foundation upon which your relationship can survive. In the hardest of times, lack of trust is one of the reasons relationships fall apart. Then we have lack of integrity. Lack of integrity. Person shouldn't lie and keep his promises. Then we have gratitude, we have loyalty, we have love. You all know all these. Responsibility and accountability. In private relationships, one is bestowed with various responsibilities, such as responsibility towards child, towards life partner, towards parents. Then we have tolerance and acceptance. Both tolerance and acceptance lead to less conflict and harmony in the society, especially in a country like India, where multiple religions, cultures, and ideologies exist. Then we have ethics in private partnership are generally directed by what? What directs, what guides your behaviors in private partnerships, private relationships. Again, even here, religion plays a big role. Those who are religious and theist, they accept the divine commandments and act accordingly, speak truthfully, they are compassionate and follow them in their personal life to please God at least. Even if not out of their own willingness, at least to please God, they act ethically. In order to attain salvation, for example, 10 commandments, then we have all those things that we have already discussed. Then we have individual virtues. Virtues such as truthfulness, honesty are important factors in deciding ethics in private relationships. We all have our own set of individual virtues. Then social norms are there. Some of the values are also learned from environmental factors that influence human beings, such as family, peer group, society. These are seen. Then we have law of the land again here. What is the importance of ethics in private relationships? Why do we need ethics in private relationships? Leads to living a good life. It leads to living a good life. Enables individuals to sail smoothly through difficult time and lead a good life. It is required for the right decision making, then character development, adherence to good values such as honesty, integrity, equality, etc. help in character development. Then ethical lessons for children. Ethical living in private relations, especially within home, influences how parents behave, how grandparents behave, directly influences the behavior of children. It works as the first lesson of ethics for them. Then it is also important for acceptance in public life. How you behave in your personal life has a direct impact on your public perception. Ethics in personal relationships make a personality more acceptable in public life. For example, the wonderful relationship of Virat Kohli and Anushka Sharma. Their private relationship has a huge impact on how they are perceived by the public, right? Following. More tolerance for imperfection. There will be imperfections within the family, but you will have more tolerance. People used to have a high index of tolerance for imperfection in private relationships because of mutual trust, love, dependence, and these virtues. Then we come to ethics in public relationship. Ethics in public relationship. Public life is anything that is situated. What do we call public life? How can we define public life? It is anything that is situated in, occurs in, and interacts with public domain. Anything that comes under the purview of public domain, whether it is public places or through the media. It is intended for a large audience to consume and participate in rather than a small or exclusive audience. So ethics in public relationships includes ethical values and moral standards followed by an individual while you are interacting with the public in your profession, in your business, professional life. It includes what kind of moral values are you carrying in your public life, in your professional life. So this here, ethics in public relationships, is mostly governed by power. Example, relationship between three organs of the government: executive, legislature, and judiciary. It is governed by power, isn't it? Power is the dynamic relationships of a civil servant with citizen, mostly governed by power. Any framework of ethical behavior must include the following elements. Any framework of ethical behavior in public relationship must include the following elements. It should have codified ethical norms and practices when it comes to, because it is formal, unlike your private life where things are informal and where virtues and values differ from person to person. But here you have to have a codified ethical norms and practices in place. Then one fundamental difference of public relationships from private ones is, in private relationships you can have personal biases, like you can favor one child over the other. You can favor your own child over your siblings, children, or their cousins. But in public service demands absolute impartiality, objectivity, and non-partisanship. You cannot be partial when it comes to public relationships. Correct? In public relationships, you have to disclose personal interest to avoid conflict of interest. What does it mean? Disclose personal interest in order to avoid conflict of interest means a legal and moral mandate. There is a legal as well as a moral mandate requiring you all in future public servants, my dear students, future public servants, you all will be having a legal and moral mandate requiring you to declare any personal or financial or familial ties you have to a government project, a tender, or a policy. If there is an upcoming government project, if there's a tender and one of your relatives is participating in that, is taking part in that, is joining that in any way, they are involved in that tender or in that project, you have to declare it in that case. This actively prevents conflict of interest. Otherwise, you will be biased, and it is your legal and moral mandate to disclose any familial ties. Where an official is torn between public duty and personal gain. For example, if a bureaucrat is heading a committee, if you are heading a committee and you are required to award a highway contract and your brother's company is bidding for the contract, then you must disclose it and step down from being in the committee, from heading that committee. It shifts governance from self-interest, which is ethical egoism, we have learned just now, to public trusteeship. Pay attention to these terms, okay? You can directly write, okay, it shifts governance from self-interest to public interest. That is a light answer, like basic answer. It will become a pro answer when you write, it shifts governance from self-interest, which is ethical egoism, to public trusteeship. You will gain more marks when you use ethical terminologies like this, theories like these, okay? Yes, many a times loyalty to family can conflict with public duty. In that case, you have to go with your public duty. You have to see the situation. I cannot, without understanding the situation, I cannot be saying that you have to prioritize this over the other. But constitutional moralism is, remember, is your number one anchor. You have to hold on to that. But you have to see what kind of family situation it is. These kind of dilemmas we will be solving in our case study part. It's going to be very interesting. Now, there will be ways. Okay, there's no black and white answer, this option over this. Sometimes, or most of the time, the answer, the correct answer lies in the gray area. Correct answer lies somewhere in the mean, like the golden mean. You know, you have to devise a whole new option where you don't have to completely sacrifice on your family, but you don't have to compromise on your ethical principles as well. Okay. Then we have providing norms for qualifying and disqualifying a public functionary. In public relationships, we have to have codified, we have to have norms for qualifying or disqualifying, like setting clear and legally binding criteria for who is fit to hold public office, and establishing strict red lines that will get them fired. That has to be strict, otherwise there's no point, there's no meaning. Like criminal records, corruption charges, severe misconduct, etc. It establishes the minimum moral floor, the norms, the laws. It establishes the minimum moral floor for entry into public service. It ensures that individuals who lack integrity are barred completely from holding power over citizens, thereby protecting the sanctity and dignity of public institutions. Okay, in order to protect the dignity and sanctity of public institutions, we have to have a strong boundary. We have to bar people who lack integrity from holding public offices. Then creating a mechanism for enforcing the relevant codes. You have to create a mechanism to enforce. Simply having codes in place on paper is not enough. We have to enforce it. Setting up independent, powerful watchdog bodies to enforce, like Lokpal, like Central Vigilance Commission, or internal departmental inquiries to investigate violations and punish corrupt officers. A code of ethics without an enforcement mechanism is just a piece of paper, and it's not at all useful. Human nature is susceptible to temptation. We have to understand that human nature is susceptible to temptation. And knowing that there is a swift, sudden, and strict penalty for breaking the rules act as a vital external deterrent, ensuring probity in governance. What do you mean by probity? Do you know what probity is? Do you know what probity is? Probity in governance. Probity. You'll keep hearing probity. We have an entire unit called probity later on. I think it's unit 8 maybe. But probity is a strict adherence to highest levels of integrity, transparency, accountability in governance. Strict adherence to highest level of integrity, accountability, transparency in governance. Okay, then we have one very important topic. It's called Nolan Committee Report, or 7 Principles of Public Life. Nolan Committee gave us the 7 most important principles of public life. The questions from this part is often repeated. Pay attention, guys. In honor of its first chairman, Lord Nolan, the Committee on Standards in Public Life. So Nolan Committee and Committee on Standards in Public Life are not two, but one and the same. So do not get confused if in the exam you see Standards in Public Life instead of the word Nolan. It is the same. Was occasionally referred to as the Nolan Committee. The committee has outlined the following 7 principles of public life. What are the 7 principles of public life? According to Nolan Committee, number 1 is selflessness. Selflessness, not thinking about yourself first. Holders of public office should take decisions solely in terms of public interest is a very important keyword. Public interest, not self-interest. Public interest, not self-interest, okay? Public interest. They should not do so in order to gain financial or other material benefits for themselves, their family, or even their friends. Not for you, not for your family, not for your friends. Solely for public interest. Number 2 is integrity. It is the practice of being honest and showing a consistent and uncompromising adherence to moral and ethical principles. It has to be consistent. When you carry yourself well or your actions are ethical only for a short period of time, you cannot be called a person of integrity. You have to consistently show ethical behavior and uncompromising adherence to moral and ethical principles. For example, Mahatma Gandhi and Abraham Lincoln were exemplary leaders who were famous for their integrity. Because in extreme situations, both of them in times of crisis adhered with their values, like Lincoln's sticking to abolition of slavery and Gandhi towards non-violence even in times of crisis. Not just when times are easy, but especially when times are challenging, when times are difficult. Okay? Then we have objectivity. Objectivity, it means taking decisions based upon established facts and figures. Facts and figures, data, rather than personal opinion or biases. For example, carrying out public business, including making public appointments, awarding contracts. When you make public appointments, jobs, awarding contracts, or recommending individuals for rewards and benefits, holders of public office should make choices solely based on merit, not on personal preference, not on bias, not for nepotism. Then we have accountability. Holders of public office are accountable for their decisions and actions to public and must submit themselves to whatever scrutiny is appropriate to their office. Pay attention to these words, my dear. Accountability. Holders of public office, they're accountable, they're responsible, they're answerable. Accountability means answerable. Answerable, responsible. Okay? They're accountable, they're responsible, they're answerable for their decisions, for your decisions and your actions. You have to be able to defend and justify to public and must submit themselves to whatever public scrutiny is appropriate to their office. For example, as railway minister, this is a story of 1956, but extremely important. As railway minister under Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, Lal Bahadur Shastri tendered his resignation after a major railway accident in Mahbubnagar, Andhra Pradesh in August 1956. 112 people died taking moral responsibility. He resigned taking moral responsibility and accountability. This is an ultimate example of moral responsibility and accountability. He resigned, but then Prime Minister Nehru persuaded him not to do otherwise. But the example of Lal Bahadur Shastri, do remember it. You can quote it. It will be very useful in your answers. Knowing Lal Bahadur Shastri ji well, what he did, his exemplary his show, his exhibition of his personal beliefs, of his accountability, and moral responsibility. Lal Bahadur Shastri. If you have to go to Labasna. Yes, you have to know him well, what he did. You have to know about his values, about his ethics, about his virtues, if you have to go to LBS NAA, right? Next, we have another example. I'm bringing examples to you because you will need that. In order to score high in your exams, you will have to give examples as often as you can. So we have another example of Sir Rinku Singh Rahi, IAS. While he was serving as social welfare officer in UP, he relentlessly exposed massive multi-crore scholarship scam within his own department. Despite facing severe systemic backlash and brutal assassination attempt, I believe he was fired 7 times, I think. Assassination attempt that left him permanently disabled, he refused to compromise his values. Can you imagine risking his life even? Later, when placed in sidelined desk post, he stunned bureaucracy by formally refusing to accept salary under the principle of no work, no pay. He was not given any actual work, therefore he refused his salary. His refusal to take taxpayers' money without delivering public value serves as the modern masterclass in real life of what? Conscience, his own conscience, of accountability and public trusteeship. Taxpayers' money, acting as a trustee of taxpayers' money. Right? Openness. Openness. Holders of public office should be as open as possible about all decisions and actions they take. They should give reasons. That means transparency. They should give reasons for their decisions and restrict information only when the wider public interest clearly demands. Clearly demands. They should be as open as possible, because sometimes for reasons like privacy or national security reasons, not all information can be disclosed. But you have to be as open as possible, and you have to restrict information only when wider public interest clearly demands. Yes? Example, Vinod Rai, former CAG, who turned the office of CAG into powerful force of openness and transparency by unearthing the 2G scam of 2008. So this is another example. Then honesty. It can be defined as being trustworthy, loyal, fair, and sincere. An honest person is free of deceit. You do not deceive. An honest person does not deceive, is truthful and sincere, and does not tell a lie. For example, Ashok Khemka is known as the crusader of honesty. Ashok Khemka. You have to know examples. Now he's retired. He was transferred 55 times as punishment posting for exposing corruption. He's an exemplary leader and impartial, no matter which government is in power. He has been acting strictly adhering to his ethical values. Now, leadership. Holders of public office should promote and support these principles by leadership and example. A leader is someone who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. That means leadership and example. You have to show the way. You know the way, you go the way, and you show other people which way to follow. Leadership is important. Now, what is the importance of ethics in public public relationship. Why do we need ethics in public relationships? Even public relationships are the ones that are the result of one's profession, such as civil service, or status in society, such as that of prime minister or president. Ethics in public relations serve as a guide for one's action, decisions, and behavior, of course. Then it acts as a moral compass when you face conflicts. It helps you to resolve conflict of interest, developing a moral compass for navigating ethical dilemmas and resolving conflict of interest. Then it helps you in effective and balanced decision making. It increases the credibility of the office. It's not just limited to you or your reputation, okay, but it goes beyond that. The credibility of your office or your institution or organization depends on your ethical conduct. Yes? Following? How is it going? How is it going for you guys? I hope you're understanding. Ethical principle public relations call for upholding transparency when dealing with any information, sensitive or not. Blurring fact and fiction can cause serious rift in credibility. If fact and fiction is blurred in your office, it can cause serious rift in credibility and tarnish the reputation of you, of your office, of your institution and organization. Then trustworthy relationship with people. Following the code of ethics can help build a much desired trust between organizations and the public, you and the public, or organizations and the public. So it is important for that relationship. Minimum level of courtesy. It induces the sense of belongingness among the common masses. Then we have impartiality and non-partisanship. What is impartiality and non-partisanship? Impartiality, treating people equally. Non-partisanship, no matter which party, which government is, which party is governing right now, which government is in place, but you act, but you are practicing non-partisanship. That means you are not being biased. You are performing in the same way, no matter which government comes, which government goes. Right to equality under Article 14 of Indian Constitution encourages public employees to avoid bias, avoid nepotism and other situations where there might be conflict of interest. For instance, there is Janta Darbar, which is public hearings organized by chief ministers. Every citizen is allowed to raise their grievance. That is an example. Again, the same things are in chart format. For private relations, duties are voluntary. See, you have duties, but duties are self-imposed. How much love will I show? How much discipline will I be? How much care will I show? How loyal will I be? That is self-imposed. There's no external authority to judge me. It is voluntary and it is informal. Example, standing by your friend or your loved ones in good and bad times, providing good facilities for your children, etc. That is voluntary. If you fail, the relationship may remain intact. Even if you fail to maintain high ethical standards when it comes to your private relationships, even then the relationship may remain intact. The family does not suddenly fall apart if a certain person fails to live up to other people's expectation, right? But here duties are externally imposed and formally mentioned in codes. For example, All India Civil Services Conduct Rules, Prevention of Corruption Act, and failure to oblige usually ends the relationship, breaks trust, ends relationship between you and the organization, you and the people. Okay? Then we've come to the end of the class, but before that we have to do this PYQs, still important, still left. We have to discuss these important PYQs. Okay, so let's begin. In 2024 it was asked, explain the key dimensions. Okay, question is key dimensions of ethics. that influence human actions. How does it influence human actions? Discuss how these dimensions shape ethical decision making in professional context. Let's see how to answer. First of all, there's one simple line saying ethics acts as a moral compass. This is only a model answer. You need not write exactly this one. You can come up with your own answer, but you have to give a short introduction at first, just simply saying that ethics acts as moral compass guiding human conduct. Very, very short. Or you can skip this line entirely and directly say that key dimensions of ethics are, you can just begin like that. Naming, this is a very short and crisp introduction. Core dimensions are focusing on duty. You can just write focusing on duty. Duty is important. One dimension is duty, one dimension is consequence, another dimension could be character. But focusing on duty and writing deontology increases your chances of scoring high. Then consequences, that means utilitarianism. And character, that is virtue ethics, help professionals resolve internal moral conflicts and maintain probity in governance. Pay attention to keywords here. When you write this kind of introduction, your impression is already built. Your first impression is already set. So core dimensions of ethics, the duty dimension, which is deontology, it focuses strictly on following rules, laws, professional codes of conduct regardless of final outcome. It is not paying attention to final outcome. Then another dimension is the outcome dimension, which is teleological, focuses on the results of an action, aiming to maximize public welfare and achieve the greatest good for greatest number. You can also write utilitarianism or consequentialism instead of writing teleological, because we have not yet studied teleology. So you can write utilitarianism here or consequentialism. Same, it's the same. Then the character dimension, which is virtue ethics, it focuses on inner values of the administrator, cultivating foundational traits like integrity, like compassion and impartiality. Now, the next part of the question is, how does it impact more professional decision making? How? It helps balance rules with compassion. As a civil servant, using only duty dimension to maintain legal order, but you have to apply. You cannot just use duty dimension, but you have to apply the outcome dimension as well to ensure that the rules are implemented with empathy, preventing hardships for the vulnerable. You cannot just look at the duty dimension, but you have to learn how to balance. Then handling pressure. When facing political or external pressure, virtue ethics prevents a crisis of conscience. If you have virtue ethics, it will help you prevent crisis of conscience, helping the officer remain neutral and non-partisan. Can you see that? Yes? Okay. Then in public service, combining these ethical dimensions builds emotional intelligence. Balancing rules with public good ensures that administrative, and we have another point was left, guiding public trust. These dimensions help administrators practice Nolan principle. See how we have included Nolan principle here in the answer. Principle of public life, transforming everyday bureaucrats into trustees of public welfare. Then we have a short conclusion. In public service, combining these ethical dimensions builds emotional intelligence. Balancing rules with public good ensures administrative decisions are always uphold constitutional morality. Simple. A very short introduction, then the body with ethical terminologies, then we have a very concise conclusion. Okay? Now, next question is, ethics is knowing the difference between what you have the right to do and what is right to do. This is a quote by Potter Stewart. In the context of this statement, the question is, what does ethics seek to promote? What is ethics seeking to promote in human life? And how do ethical values assist in the resolution of conflicts faced by individuals in day-to-day functioning? What does it promote and how does it resolve conflicts? Now the introduction starts like, because the question states a quote by Potter Stewart. Potter Stewart's quote highlights a critical boundary between legality, what is legal and permitted, and morality, what is ethically good. While the law establishes a minimum floor of permissible behavior, ethics provides the internal framework and guides human actions towards higher righteousness, ensuring probity in governance. So this is the introduction. You can make it even shorter. Now this is feeling a little bit long to me. You can make it a one sentence introduction, okay? Make it shorter. What ethics seek to promote in human life? Directly coming to the point. Spirit of trusteeship. We have studied just now. It is seeking to promote the spirit of trusteeship. It moves individuals from self-interest, which is ethical egoism, to active custodians of common good, prioritizing public welfare over personal convenience. Then dignity and compassion. It is promoting dignity and compassion, fosters empathy for marginalized sections, ensuring that actions respect the fundamental rights of all citizens. Then it is seeking to promote social harmony by promoting fairness and impartiality. Ethics strengthens the moral fabric of a society, right? Replacing conflict with cooperation. So these are the things ethics is seeking to promote. The next part of the question was, how does it help in resolving day-to-day conflicts? By overcoming cognitive dissonance. When personal convenience clashes with professional duty, ethics provides clarity. There's a cognitive dissonance. When there's a clash within yourself between your professional duty and your personal convenience, and then ethics comes into play. It provides clarity. It helps individuals align their actions with organizational rules. Then it helps in navigating legal loops in situations when an action is legally permissible. Legally it is permissible, but morally it is harmful. Ethics guides administrators to choose public well-being or public interest. See, I told you, that's a very important keyword. Public well-being over strict legalism. Public well-being over strict legalism. Then calming a crisis of conscience. By applying virtue ethics, individuals can withstand external pressures of systemic corruption, emulating absolute integrity of leaders like Lal Bahadur Shastri. You bring in that example. And ultimately, there will be a short conclusion. Ultimately, ethics transforms the exercise of legal power into meaningful public service. Aligning daily choices with constitutional morality, it ensures that an individual rights always exercised to fulfill the moral duties to society. However you want to conclude, a brief conclusion. Then next question, it was asked in 2016, explained with the help of two examples where an act is ethically right but not legally. Two examples of an act which is ethically right but not legally, and act that is legally right but not ethically. First of all, start with an introduction defining how law and ethics is different. Law represents society's codified rules backed by state power, while ethics represents the collective conscience of the society. While law mandates what humans must do, ethics guides what they should be doing. This creates a clear boundary between legality and ethics or true probity in governance. Number one is ethically right. Examples of something that is ethically right but legally wrong. Emergency, jumping a red traffic light, or over speeding to make way for an ambulance. Legally, it is a clear violation of traffic rules, but it is ethically, you have the moral obligation to prevent the loss of a life. So legally wrong, but ethically right. Example 2 is when a poor student photocopying an entire textbook they cannot afford for their exam. It violates copyright laws and intellectual property rights, but it is serving the ethical goal of fulfilling their right to education. That is an example of something that is illegal but ethical. Then, legally right but ethically wrong. Example is a landlord instantly evicting a tenant who just lost their job and who failed to pay the rent on that exact due date. Legally, the contract allows it, but ethically rendering a family homeless, especially during a crisis, highlights severe selfishness, ethical egoism. Yes or no? Understood? Then, next example is keeping the excess change. When a tired cashier accidentally, a shopkeeper gives you excess change. Legally, the transaction is closed and transaction is closed. You will not be charged for shoplifting. But it is an example of passive dishonesty or failure of passive honesty, as the loss is deducted from a low-wage worker's salary. Then, just concluded. Here we are mentioning second ARC, which is important. As recommended by second ARC, administrators cannot rely on law alone. When laws are silent or rigid, an individual's conscience comes into play, and the principles of constitutional morality bridge the gap to ensure true justice. Yeah? And the next question, last question for today is, do private ethics have a bearing on your public life? Private ethics having a bearing on public life. Can private ethical behavior be separated from public ethics without consequences? Can it be compartmentalized, your private ethical behavior from your public ethics? Let's see. Introduction is, private ethics governs personal relationships through values like fidelity, family duty, while public ethics demands institutional virtues like impartiality, objectivity, and non-partisanship. This is an introduction. So this part you can leave. Though their domains differ, private and public ethics are deeply interconnected. Yeah, though their domains differ, public and private ethics are deeply interconnected. A compromise in one invariably erodes the other. It has a direct effect. Bearing of private ethics on public life. An individual's moral character is unified whole. Ultimately, I am a unified whole. I am the same person, whether I'm in my private life or in my public life. I'm not two different personalities. I'm one and the same person, right? So, an individual's personal character is a unified whole. Values internalized in the private sphere act as foundation of probity in governance. The positive spillover. There's a positive spillover and a negative spillover, but spillover is there, and that cannot be neglected. Positive spillover, an individual who practices deep honesty and empathy in family life naturally carries those virtues into public administration, fostering strong institutional morality. A caring person, an honest person, an empathetic person acts the same way in administration as well. The negative spillover is a weak private ethics such as greed, such as deep-seated caste and gender prejudices at home, inevitably leads to public failures like nepotism. Greed leads to nepotism, and caste and gender prejudices leads to biased decision making. Consequences of artificial separation. Even if you try to separate both, there are consequences of artificially trying to separate. Attempting to compartmentalize the two spheres triggers severe systemic consequences like cognitive dissonance. A bureaucrat who acts ethically at work but unethically at home experiences internal moral conflict inside their head. They will have no peace, no harmony, no equilibrium, which eventually paralyzes their professional judgment and emotional intelligence. Erosion of public trust. When an administrator's private misconduct in a personal life is exposed, for example, domestic violence, beats up his wife at home, if that is exposed, it destroys public faith. Public will no longer put their trust in a bureaucrat as such. In the institution, they represent violating the core Nolan principles of public life. Then finally, conclusion is true integrity cannot be fragmented. It is whole, one unified whole. Upholding public trusteeship requires seamless alignment between private conscience and public duty, ensuring consistent compliance with constitutional morality. And we have come to the end of the class. That's a wrap for today. And it's a wonderful wrap to a wonderful ending to our Unit 1, Ethics and Human Interface. Tomorrow we'll be beginning with Unit 2. So I hope you all enjoyed the class. Thank you so much for attending, and we'll meet again tomorrow. Thank you.